Hey everybody, and welcome to your readings for the week of October 8th through the 14th. Yes, it's much later than I normally record, but it was so warm today. Oh my gosh. Just so warm. It's like our last warm day and then it finally cools off and I was over summer before and then it came back and just to remind me that I'm really clearly over it. So yeah. This is not welcome in October, but I live in California. It happens kind of a lot. So we're going to get through these readings here before I just completely and totally fall over because it is kind of late. So we're going to jump right in, get started with Darcy like we always do. Got some good news actually for Tauruses because Venus is officially moving out of that square that she has been in with Jupiter. Now, the good news is that you only have to deal with it for the first 2 days of the week, and then she's gone. The not so great news is the moon is escorting her on out of there, so the moon is going to join that challenge a little bit, which is frustrating and annoying, and we don't want that, but it's a couple of days and then it's over. That's the good news. Venus is focused on long-term goals. The moon brings financial long-term goals into focus, while Uranus continues to be focused on those you love, but is very close to the cusp of your day-to-day schedule as well. So it kind of feels like you don't really have the time to focus on your financial goals. It kind of sort of, to me, I interpret this as sort of feeling like you're being pulled in a bunch of different directions, right? And that could be pulled into different optional directions. That can be because you know what you need to do, but other people are sort of pulling you into different directions because they need your help. It's really sort of frustrating, and it really comes to a head on Monday and Tuesday. The moon's influence doesn't help it at all. It makes it's almost a guaranteed emotional reaction. But the more you are aware of the challenge, the easier it is to navigate through the emotions of that challenge at the same time. That is helpful. We still do continue to have a grand sextile with Pluto and Neptune as well. Pluto goes direct about midweek, so no longer retrograde anymore, while Neptune continues to be retrograde and is very much focused on the mind and how the mind works. And again, with Uranus really being focused on family, those that you love, and in a sense also focused on your day-to-day schedule, it's sort of like looking back and wishing that you could harness this time with those that are no longer around, and it sort of gives you motivation to put that energy into the people that are here now, rather than, it's not saying that you have a tendency to wallow over those that aren't here and ignore the ones that are. It's just sort of, it just sort of comes in and reminds you that the people that are here also need your time, but they don't have to take up your time at the same time. There's a difference there. You want to have quality fun time with the people around you, but not necessarily be stuck feeling like you're their crutch at the same time. So it really is all about balancing that time and putting boundaries. Just because you have a difficult relationship with somebody doesn't necessarily mean that it's a toxic relationship either. A lot of times it just takes us reacting in different ways to make it run a little bit smoother, if that makes sense. So good news, good news, good news. And that's what I have for you this week. Wait, one more thing, because I did forget that I believe it's Wednesday, Thursday, the moon actually moves into a trine with Uranus. So it becomes a grand trine with the moon and Pluto. At this stage, Pluto is direct. So, and Pluto's focus is on the past, while the moon brings that long-term goal focus in there again. So I feel like One of the big things about this for you specifically is that it has been feeling like nothing is moving forward. This square with Venus just sort of ends, and then all of a sudden the moon comes in and says, okay, it's time to go. So things are going to start moving forward. It's like whatever's been holding you back just sort of snaps, and you're not being held back anymore, which is definitely where you want to be energetically. So that is what I have for you, my friend. Moving on to Kendra, that really hasn't been hugely difficult, but it has been difficult. Square between Uranus and Venus is ending. We get Sunday with it, Monday with it. It's gone by Tuesday. That's the good news. The not so great news is the moon is literally escorting her out. So the moon actually does play a part in that square, making it kind of more of an emotional square, if that makes sense, or emotional situation, I guess. Oddly enough, when I was doing the horoscopes, I was thinking of you because of the situation that you're in right now with your visitor, and how much stress that is putting on you, and how much that stress is really getting in the way of you being able to focus on those long-term goals, specifically the creative ones. And I just feel like these 2 days of the week, this is really when that's going to come to a head and be like a big problem. And I'm not saying that the only solution to the problem is to boot your visitors out. Sometimes the solution is all in changing your perception of it, if that makes sense. And I know it does, because you completely know that for sure. It also is going to feel when it ends like the shackles that have been holding you back are just gone. They just simply vanish, and you can move forward. So when we move into Thursday and the moon actually moves into a trine with Uranus, which is also in a trine with Pluto, we have that grand trine magic that day that is almost like shooting you out of a cannon. So you lose the shackle and boom, you're just on your way, basically, because the moon is also focused on long-term goals, and Pluto's focus really is on changing, eliminating old behaviors and replacing them with new ones, preferably new ones that actually are really successful, which is something that I know you've been doing as well. We also continue to have a grand sextile with Pluto and Neptune as well. Neptune's focus continues to be on the mind and how the mind works, and really leaving that space clear for intuition to come through and help with that guidance. So it's just a reminder to keep on track with that. We all fall off that wagon from time to time, and that's okay. As long as you get back on it, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter how long it takes. None of that matters. As long as you get back to it, that is what is important. So challenge gone by the end of Monday. Everything is smooth sailing from here on out. So either you are literally just going to put down that thing that has been a problem for you for a really long time. And once you do, it's like all the air is clear and there's no hesitation anymore. Literally all the hesitation is gone. It's awesome. I'm so happy that this is finally happening for you, because I feel like the energy is literally just going to switch gears. And so enjoy that. Lots of self-care, obviously. So that's what I have for you. Moving on to Jeannette, we have no planets in Gemini this week. Focus is moving in this week to both relationships and your day-to-day schedule, which is kind of interesting. Because I feel like a lot of it does revolve around making sure you spend quality time in your relationships. Sometimes when you have relationships developed with a lot of people, it's really hard to give anybody any quality time. Or it can feel like you're so busy giving everybody else quality time that somebody feels left out, if that makes sense. By the way, that is the Taurus curse, to be left out, just letting you know, okay? For future reference. I feel that, and I swear I've said this before, but maybe I'm repeating myself. I'm not really sure, but I feel that especially this week that the energies are lining up to, it's really important to make sure that time is put into place, that you do have quality time with you and your hubby, you know, quality time with your kids, quality time with your friends, quality time with all these other people. That's great. Okay. But he needs that time too. And not just because he's the provider, but because he needs to feel like you want to spend that time with him, if that makes sense. When things get stressful, it just becomes a nightmare for everybody. And that's why you have to put into place these times where it's just hanging out and eating dinner, where it's just the two of you doing something that you enjoy doing together. So you can put all that aside for a while. It really will make or break the relationship. But I'm also kind of being drawn to making time for yourself at the same time, and quality time. Not I'm being pulled in a million different directions time. I'm talking about time to focus, to quiet your mind, to empty your mind, to have your intuition come through, to be able to tell you what is the thing that you should be focused on right now. Just one thing at a time. We'll start with one thing at a time. I know it's really, really difficult for you. I know how hard it is. I'm an intellectual too, but it really makes a huge difference. Suddenly you start to feel like you're finishing projects, like you're not just bumping from one thing to another and leaving everything kind of sort of half done, if that makes sense, because it gets really frustrating also. And it also feels like you're never getting anything accomplished. And that is just the worst thing in the world, really. I mean, it's makes everything just that much more difficult. So it helps to change your perception of things, which changes the energy, which changes everything. Basically, when you're going through a lot of stressful situations, which your health right there is like one big huge one. When you're going through a lot of stressful situations, it's imperative to do this. Otherwise, you're taking all that stress into everything that you're doing, and it just makes things difficult. So that's what I have for you, my friend. Moving on to Connie. Let's talk about Venus leaving Leo today, not today. Sunday, Monday, gone by Tuesday. Bam. Let's just talk about that. Sounds great. Until we realize that the moon is coming in and escorting her on out for you. So the last couple of days of her being in your sign, causing all the problems that she has been causing, will be amplified by the moon, unfortunately. Luckily, it's not a full moon, so its power, actually, we're moving into a new moon, so its power is not incredibly challenging, but it's challenging nonetheless. Venus is leaving your sign, continuing to be in opposition with Saturn, which is retrograde, which is mirroring that responsibility back to yourself. And Saturn's focus is equally on how you think and influences from the past, which is a pretty clear indication that a lot of times our thought processes are programmed by other people in the past. That's fine. We're in charge of the reprogramming. And Venus's influence is very much on long-term goals. The moon coming in is going to bring an influence of long-term financial goals into this. So two things about that. One, it's a very clear indication and a reminder that you are responsible for your success or failure. You can't blame other people. Even if you have in the past, even if it's a valid blame, even if all of these things line up, it still comes down to you and what you're willing to do to succeed. And it's owning that. It's taking control of that makes or breaks whatever the next steps are, if that makes sense. The other thing is that the moon also plays into Venus's continued sextile with Mars. Again, we have the masculine, feminine working together, creating magic, which is always fun and awesome. But it's more than that. Mars is very much focused in career. And so when you're talking about long-term financial goals, obviously, where is that money coming from? It's coming from whatever you're doing in your career. So I feel like this energy, amplified by the moon, is really going to show you the direction that you need to go in. For example, it could create such a challenge with the company that you're working for that you say enough is enough and put in more effort to finding something else. It also could do the opposite of that. So it's almost like an energy that is like making the decision for you in some way, shape, or form. And it's the circumstances and how they play out that determine how that decision is made. I hope that makes sense. As we move into the week, we no longer have Venus influence whatsoever. Focus is still on long-term financial goals. It gives you a space to be able to focus on what you want that to be. Specifically, what you want that to be. Without any other influences, which is nice. Does this mean that nobody that you know is going to come in and cause a problem? No. But there isn't the influences that create the bigger problems either. We're just going back to the normal craziness that we normally have to deal with, which under the circumstances is much better. So that's what I have for you, my friend. Moving on to Jenny, Venus is leaving. Venus is leaving. Sunday, Monday, boom, gone. That's the good news. The not so great news is that the moon is literally escorting her out of there. So she is going to join any aspects that Venus is continuing as she exits. The first thing that the moon is going to join in is her continued opposition with Saturn. Saturn is retrograde. Saturn is mirroring that responsibility back right at ourselves. Saturn is basically showcasing mindset, how much that matters in terms of your long-term goals, specifically your long-term financial goals, because that is what Venus and the moon are presenting to us right now, as well as looking at the past and the influences of the past that maybe created those mindsets to help you unravel and reprogram them for your own success, if that makes sense. Now, you've been doing this a lot. I know you have over the years, so this should be nothing for you. You know that the lesson, of course, is more difficult when you resist it, but if you don't resist it, that doesn't make it any less difficult either. So the question is, are you taking responsibility for your own actions, or are you blaming other people? And I'm just going to go with it's a 50-50 because we all do both, right? We just want to make sure that we're not doing one more than the other in unhealthy ways, if that makes sense. And really, this is what this opposition is all about for you. Venus also continues to be in a sextile with Mars, and the moon is definitely going to amplify that as well. Mars is an energy that's going straight into your career right now. So I know this is, I know this week, we've already talked about it. This is a lot of energy going into what you do because you're at a deadline. And of course, being at a deadline, that means that it's crunch time. So it is going to zap your energy. But it's also sort of showing me that as much as what you do is a logical thing, bringing that empathy into it makes a huge difference. In many ways, just for the ability to calm people down when they're literally losing their minds, bringing that empathy and compassion in like you do helps a lot. And it may be that you just don't feel it. That's why these planets are lining up to help you with that, to help get you through that without losing your mind, your temper, your patience, whatever it is. You're always pretty good about that. But everybody has their limits, and I feel like it has been harder and harder and harder to do that in many ways because people are just crazy. They're crazy. Don't tell anybody I said that. After this first couple of days, astrologically, things do calm down. And I feel like that astrological calm down is really going to work in your favor. It won't be quite as crazy. It may look like it is right at the beginning of the week, but as the week progresses, it turns out to be not as crazy as it could be and not as crazy as it has been in the past, which is a really good thing. We do continue to have the dark moon influencing Leo. We haven't talked about her in a long time because there's been so much other stuff going on, but she's there. She is direct. She is all about change and promoting change and growth, or maybe even changing tactics in various different things. And her focus is very much on finances during this change. So in some ways, I feel like in the middle of all of this chaos, you're going to find these various different ideas that may be very helpful in terms of your career goals. Maybe making a little bit extra money, maybe investments that, might actually work for you, different things like that. So it's kind of like getting a tip, really, when you weren't expecting it, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you, my friend. Moving on to Linda, we have Venus moving into Virgo, and the moon is escorting her in as she comes in, which is not necessarily a bad thing, okay? But it does have its points, because Venus does move into Virgo in an opposition with Saturn that will last all week long. Saturn is retrograde. Usually a retrograde Saturn means we are mirroring the responsibility of the whole thing back on ourselves, right? We're taking responsibility for our shit, not pointing the finger at who owns the rest of it, if that makes sense. And Venus is very much focused on long-term goals. On Wednesday, when she bumps in literally in conjunction with the moon here, this is going to bring this emotional amplification here, because when we're talking about long-term goals, the moon's really bringing this sort of influence of finances into it. So it's all about the long-term financial goals here. And it's not that you don't take responsibility for that. You've always taken responsibility for that. But at the same time, I feel like this is going to play out for you in a way to where it feels like somebody is saying you're not being responsible. Or there are situations that come up that make you feel like you're being irresponsible, and you want to avoid that panic of, oh my God, what do I do? I'm being irresponsible, kind of a thing. Or the arguments that ensues when it sounds like somebody is saying that you are being irresponsible, if that makes sense. Two good things, though. One of which is the moon moving into a grand trine with Uranus and Pluto on Thursday, second day of the moon being in Virgo. Grand Earth trines are awesome. They get things done. I love it when there's grand Earth trines. And with the moon continuing to focus on those long-term goals, specifically those financial ones, Pluto's influence is in the past. So it is bringing up certain things that you've done before in the past that did work and will probably continue to work, but also bringing Uranus into it, which is focused on those you love. So I really am leaning towards this is another possible financial disagreement with your family that actually turns out to be one of the best conversations you could have had, because you're literally finding a solution together, even though it didn't start off very well, if that makes sense. So honestly, there's a little bit of a communication thing going on there. And I think once you work that out, and have, like a better understanding with each other, if that makes sense, all of that's just going to kind of go away. We also have Venus in a sextile with Mars all week long. Now, Mars is all about energy. It's all kinds of energy. It's focused on your career. So getting that money, which is really, really good. I like Venus and Mars working together because it is the quintessential masculine feminine balance. And we've been to enough seminars over the years, and we've all, you've even led these seminars where we talk less about women walking into and becoming men and using both sides, using the masculine and the feminine, which is really difficult for everybody. Just because we're women does not mean we're feminine. We tend to lead in a masculine way, and that is always not taken very well for some reason. It probably has to do with centuries of women should just be seen and not heard kind of a thing. So if we soften it like women do, the delivery is a lot easier to take for the person that we're trying desperately to get this point, right? So I feel that is part of it, but I also feel that in all of the stuff that has happened, the feeling that you have of allowing the magic to take place almost feels like it's so much farther away than it used to be, because you've been through a lot, and it's really difficult to quote unquote get your zen back, as I call it. That's what that is to me. But you just have to keep working on it. You just have to keep reminding yourself. You just have to keep being aware of when your brain goes to that dark, crazy place, and managing that and taking control over that and realizing that you haven't failed yet. What makes you think you're going to now? Is you never fail until you stop trying. And I don't see you stopping anytime soon. So it's what I have for you this week. Interesting stuff. Moving on to Matalyn, Venus moves into Virgo on Tuesday in opposition with Saturn. Saturn is interesting right now because it is retrograde. It is technically in Pisces, although it's on the cusp of Aquarius as well. So there's a sort of a logical, emotional influence of both, really, because those are very clear intellectual, emotional signs right there. Venus is focused on long-term goals, while Saturn is focused really very closely on the cusp of how the mind works and the past, influences coming back from the past. So two things. One, you'll notice in your life, and you're probably starting the process of it right now, to be honest with you, that a lot of times you start to have the same perception. You start to draw the same conclusion over and over again. So the moon is actually coming into conjunction with Venus while this is happening. So this adds a little emotional influence to it, but it also adds an influence of what type of goals we're looking at. We're looking specifically at financial goals. Now, everybody has a problem. Everybody in the world, for the most part, has a problem. They don't have a relationship with their money, and they don't have a relationship with their financial goals. A lot of people just talk about being broke. A lot of people just talk about the money comes in and then it goes away. They have a very negative outlook of money. And when you have a negative outlook of money, it is impossible to get ahead financially. So you want to be aware that you're not creating or continuing to use negative mindsets, because this is a crucial time for you right now. In the very beginning stages of adulthood is when we start to create habits. And not all of them are good habits. In fact, the majority of them are usually bad habits because, let's face it, they're usually more fun. So if you can get ahead of this now, it's so much easier for you in the long run. You don't have to, but it does make things easier later on. Venus is also in a sextile with Mars, and this is very interesting. This is also taking place all week long. Mars is a tremendous energy, and it's all focused on your career, while Venus is the quintessential female who's creative and she's beautiful and she's all about love and she feels her way through things. These two planets lining up in that way sort of create that masculine feminine balance for you, so that when you're making decisions about career movement, for one thing, financial goals, you're using both. You're doing what makes sense, but you're also doing what feels right. And that is so hard for human beings to do. We always lead one way or the other, but the decisions are always so much better when you use both. And so that energy is sort of bumping in there to kind of help you out a little bit, give you a little helping hand to be able to make the best decision for you, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you, darling. And I'm going to move on to Glennis, my lovely Australian lady. The moon is moving into Libra. In fact, we're ending the week with the moon in Libra, moving into conjunction with Mercury that's still in Libra, with the sun. In fact, we have a Libra new moon right at the end of the week, which is also an eclipse day as well. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it or not. I know that we will be able to see it on our Saturday, the 14th for us, at 9:30 in the morning Pacific time. So it is solar. So I'm not sure what that is going to be for you. My advice is to look it up and see if it's possible for you to see it, because I'm not really sure. To be honest, the way it looked like North America was going to be able to see it clearer than anywhere else, but I didn't really go outside of that. So look that up and see if you can see it. I love the vibe of a solar eclipse, and I love the fact that it's very early in the morning, that we get to start off the day with it, which is really kind of nice. None of these planets are really interacting with any other planets except for Mars on his way out, because by the end of the week, Mars is officially going to be in Scorpio. It'll still be on the cusp, so you will still feel the effect of Mars this week. Irregardless, by next week, you won't feel it quite so much, if that makes sense. Mars is in a square with Pluto. The sun joins that square with Pluto towards the end of the week, so that when Mars leaves it, the sun moves into it. All of the planets that are in there are going to move into it eventually. It's not a huge challenge. It's not the end of the world. It is unfortunate. It is a little boop in the road of success, so to speak, specifically because Mars and the sun are focused on career and legacy. But Pluto's focus is on the past. Now, you can't change the past, but you can change your perception of it. You can change how it rules you. You can change how you use that experience to your advantage or disadvantage. And the square is saying you need to make that change. Otherwise, you can't move forward. And Pluto is moving direct. Pluto is your source of power. If you don't take control over that, you never get to harness the power. And that's really what that square is all about. And luckily, it's the only challenge. Mars continues to be in a trine with Saturn. Saturn is right on the cusp of your mind and how it works, and your past influences are coming into this as well. So we're sort of looking at reprogramming some old mindsets when they come up. And when they come up, you just kind of look at it and go, you know what, that I don't that doesn't apply anymore, and I'm not doing it. And then you just continue to remind yourself every time it pops up in your mind, no, we don't live there anymore. We're not entertaining that thought. We're going to change it. And that's a very helpful energy toward that. We also continue to have Mars and Venus in that sextile, bringing that balance that you Libras need so very, very much. But I feel like also because Venus is very much focused in long-term goals, and Mars is more of like an ambitious drive towards your career, it's bringing the balance that you need between the two. So that basically we're looking at your long-term goals here, regardless of what happens with those long-term goals, taking some of the heat off of it, taking some of the expectation off of it makes it easier for everything to flow the way that it needs to flow in order for you to be successful. So that energy is also going to continue throughout the week as well. So the good news is we've had a lot of planets with a whole lot of planets action going on. This is the best setup I have seen all year, because most of the planets are in the same space and they're lining up nicely with the planets that have been stuck in various different positions. So it's good to be a Libra this year. I'll just put it that way. So that's what I have for you, my friend. I'm going to take a little bit of a break and then I'm going to finish the readings. Okay, we are moving on to Regina, and we got some exciting news. Mars is moving into Scorpio. I bet you're excited about that. I'm a little scared, honestly. I mean, Scorpios, a lot of people say that Scorpios are the meanest sign on the zodiac, which I don't really agree with, honestly. I think that Scorpios match meanness with meanness. They are just as mean as what they are presented. However, I've known a lot, and they can be, depending on the Scorpio, pretty volatile, violent in some cases. That's kind of the scary part there. I don't see you being one of those Scorpios. I'm sure you have it in you. To be mean, no, absolutely not. Mars is in a few aspects with different planets, one of which is a small challenge, not a huge big deal. The other two are actually more helpful aspects. So we'll just focus on the challenge here really quick. And that is Mars square with Pluto. Pluto has been retrograde. It goes direct this week. It's focused on the past. Pluto is all about transformation and your source of personal power. And you can't change the past. So what can you do? You can change the programming that was programmed in the past. And that's where the challenge lies, is finding yourself in that position to where it feels like no matter how hard you try, you just can't do it. And the trick is that if you're trying the same thing over and over again and it's not working, you need to try a new thing. So what we humans tend to do is go, well, I tried, it didn't work, so I'm just going to stay the way that I am, which doesn't help anything. And consequently, nothing ever changes. And that's really not part of the evolution. It's not part of the development. So if it's not working, change it up a bit and see if you can improve on the situation. If that doesn't work, change it up again. Keep doing it until you find something that works, basically. That's the moral to the story there. We do have Mars continuing to be in a trine with Saturn. Saturn continues to be retrograde and is really mirroring that responsibility back at ourselves and is focused right on the cusp of the mind and how the mind works and the past influences of that. So this is the same thing as the square, only it's a helpful aspect. Well, it is a helpful aspect because it's actually showing you where the past is really influencing you. It's not necessarily influencing your day-to-day. It's not like it comes up every single day. It's the mindsets that you adopted or were programmed into you, however it worked. It's those mindsets that need to change, and you're responsible for it. And that's the thing that is helpful, is that it takes that, well, it's because my mother did it out, and puts in your lap. What are you willing to do to fix it? What are you willing to do to change it? That's the difference between a person who is healed and not healed when it comes to stuff like that. We also have Mars continuing in a sextile with Venus. I love Mars and Venus working together. They are the quintessential masculine, feminine energy. And we need both in order to make educated decisions. We need both in order to maintain our forward movement in terms of our goals, whether they be professional, financial, personal, whatever. Venus really is focused on long-term goals, while Mars is putting that aggressive energy into your career, and will continue to be putting that aggressive energy into your career throughout the next few weeks as well. So that can be interpreted as things are crazy at work. That can also be interpreted as things have gotten to the point where they're so crazy that you are moving on. You're looking for something else. You're not doing this anymore. And with Venus's influence, it helps you to look at creative outlets or different ways that you can possibly make that change. But it also reminds you that you have a big heart. And people that have big hearts tend to be taken advantage of. And the result of that is usually the person hiding their heart. And this is where Venus comes in. Because the truth is that love fixes everything. Not conditional, I can't give to you because you can't give to me love, but unconditional love. So when you have a person in front of you screaming at you, and you smile at them and say, I'm sorry you're having a bad day, I love you, they don't know what to say. And it's actually quite a lot of fun, to be honest with you. It's actually a lot of hard work too, because it's not the words that want to come out. Your feelings want to be like, look, bitch, get the fuck out of my face, right? But, and I get that. But the other alternative works so much better. And it also allows you to take control of the situation. And that's really important. The more often you can take the control of the situation, the more powerful you feel. The more powerful you feel, the less victimized you feel. It just opens things up all across the board. So fun first week with Mars. I don't feel that it's going to be a very difficult week. I think that it might feel like that because there really hasn't been a lot of planet activity going on in Scorpio. And now that there is, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, you know, especially Mars. Mars is a tremendous energy. It feels like somebody lit a flame under your butt and you can't sit down. It's kind of nice, but it's kind of exhausting at the same time, especially for fixed signs. So self-care, self-care, self-care when you're not working. So that's what I have for you, my friend. Moving on to Theresa, we have Mars moving into Scorpio this week and in aspects with other planets right off the bat. Now, one thing before I get into that is Mars is a tremendous amount of energy. So I almost feel like this is lining up with certain things that you have in place that you were launching, just launched, about to be launched, etc., etc., etc. This is a tremendously wonderful energy to have in a situation like this, because it sort of amplifies things moving forward a little bit. And while there is a challenge because Mars is in a square with Pluto, I would not say that the challenge is huge, as in it's really causing issues. What I do see about this challenge is that Pluto is the planet of transformation and personal power, which means two things we really want to talk about in terms of that. One is Pluto's influence is very much on the past. You can't change the past, but you can reprogram mindsets that were programmed in the past. And it's very strange how these things stick subconsciously. So when you come across an issue to where it feels like once again you're stuck, you want to go back to the mindset of before when that happened and make sure that your mindset is not the same, that you are on a more positive, productive, powerful mindset, and you're not over worrying it, right? So the things that you've done in the past aren't going to work this time. That's basically what that's coming down to. And the interesting thing is Mars is in a trine with Saturn, which is retrograde, all about responsibility, putting that responsibility right back on ourselves like we're supposed to, because it's not anybody else's fault but ours, our choices. It's all down to our choices. The influence of those choices is up to you whether you want to take that or not. So the responsibility is entirely on ourselves. This is a helpful aspect, with Saturn's influence being right there on the cusp of the mindset, and the influences of the past that are coming in. And just because you have influences from the past doesn't mean that they all have to be bad either. We don't talk enough about the good past influences that help us succeed now. So both of those things are playing into it. It's just a reminder that it's your responsibility to use the ones that are helpful to you and leave the ones that are not somewhere else, because you don't need those ones. We also continue to have a sextile between Mars and Venus. I love when Mars and Venus are working together. And I think with your plans, this energy is absolutely fantastic. Mars is a driving force. Lots of energy behind Mars. He's like a ball of fire that got shot out of a cannon and you can't slow him down. Venus is that young girl that's just kind of sort of flitting through and picking flowers, and she's happy and she's in love and she's creative and she's coming up with all these wonderful ideas, and she's just flowy. It's our logic and our emotion. It's making decisions based on what makes sense and what feels good at the same time, and both of them are needed. And to have this extra amplified energy going into your career goals right now is just amazing and fantastic. Like, you couldn't ask for better energy to do this. So that is really what your week is all about. We do continue to have Ceres influencing Scorpio as well. So that sort of maternal support system continues to be there in some capacity, in some way, shape, or form, be it from another source or even from yourself. You know, all the energy that you put into your family and everybody else around you should also be put into you as well. And I see that you do that most of the time. Sometimes you need a little reminder, and that's where Ceres is coming in there. So that's what I have for you this week, my friend. Moving on to Jillian, we finally have some planets moving into Scorpio. I don't know if this is great. I don't know if this is scary. It could go either way. To be honest with you, it is a little scary to me because it's Mars. And I know you Scorpios. I know a lot of different Scorpios. So I don't base all of my Scorpio knowledge on you, of course, but I have known a lot of different Scorpios. One thing that I do know about Scorpios is, yes, they can be mean. And having Mars energy behind that, that stinger could be really, that sting could go really deep. So you do want to be aware of that, because just like your aunt, for example, the words you say can be very harmful, especially when the intent is to be harmful and you go for the jugular. Right? It is a lot of times warranted. It is not always appropriate. That's a lesson that you learn as you get older, because you get forced to learn it, unfortunately. Mars is coming into your sign in a challenge with Pluto. But before I get to that challenge with Pluto, I do want to talk about Mars's trine with Saturn. The reason behind that is is that the two aspects, one positive and one negative, are very similar to each other. And Saturn's placement in this is extremely interesting. Saturn is retrograde. Saturn is all about responsibility. It is retrograding, mirroring that responsibility back to yourself. And it's right on the cusp of your mindset and the past influences of your mindset. Now, Mars is focused on career. So if you are looking for a new job, if you are deciding which direction you want to go in your career, your own brain will get in your way more than anybody else will. But it will also trick you into thinking that other people were the ones that got in the way. And if nobody presents themselves as being a problem, we can always fall back on our upbringing, our parents, our, all those different situations. I have a whole arsenal, bagged and bags and bags of why it's somebody else's fault. But it always comes back down to the choices that I make. And when I blame somebody else, I'm really giving them my power. And that's where Pluto comes in. Pluto is focused on the past. He's the planet of change, transformation, personal power, and you can't change the past. But you can change how the past runs your current reality. And that's where it is a challenge. But Saturn comes in and says, if you take responsibility for your own shit, basically, it doesn't have to be a challenge. That's ultimately the lesson there. The other thing is Mars is moving into your sign in a sextile with Venus. And I love when Mars and Venus play together. They're the quintessential masculine, feminine energy. Mars is that young man sowing his wild oats, doing all the crazy stuff that young men do. Venus is kind of the young girl who's just flitting around, waiting to fall in love. She is bright, but she can be really dumb when she does fall in love. Venus is focused on your long-term goals, while Mars is focused on that career. So I feel a lot of energy going towards what is your legacy? What direction are you going to go into? What are you interested in? And what means something enough for you to put your time and energy into it? You don't want to overthink it. You don't want to overfeel it. You want a good balance of both. And that is what Mars and Venus provides, is making decisions based on both factors, because both factors have to be taken into consideration. And it's as simple as that. This is why so many people have a hard time making a decision, because they're always torn between one or the other. You should never be torn between one or the other. You should always be leading with both as equally as possible, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you, darling. Moving on to Peg, we have no planets in Sagittarius this week. We're going to have some moon action next week, so we'll go ahead and just enjoy not having any planets in Sagittarius this week. Focus does continue to be on self this week. We are sort of moving into probably next week, maybe the week after even. We are sort of moving into this focus of trauma. And so to be focused on self and focus on trauma at the same time, to me, that is basically, that's understanding who we are by understanding what brought us to where we are. And it's not an easy journey for anybody, and it's not a likable journey for anybody either. Anybody that comes on and says, oh my gosh, yes, I've done so much self-discovery and it's so wonderful, and I've just had an amazing feeling through the whole thing, is clearly lying or not really doing it. It's hard. It really is hard. And it really is hard to pardon me, it's so hot here. I gotta put this hair up. I can't take it anymore. It's so hard to look at yourself, step out of your feelings which are there to protect you and in many cases justify your behavior. Not that you go around making, behaving badly or anything like that, but we all have our ways of getting in our own way for self-protection, for whatever reason we decide to do it. So it sort of throws us into this journey that is extremely uncomfortable, and we really don't want to do it, but we really have no choice. And in the end, when all is said and done, it does feel so much better. And it does. It does. I feel like some of these things that you are focusing on come from very deep places. And that's why it's such a difficult transition, I guess, or a difficult lesson, because these things are you put them off for a reason. You didn't want to deal with them for a reason. And it's not that you can't, and it's not that you won't, and it's not that you haven't. But it comes down to accepting things for what they are or for what they were, so that you can move on and not allow those things to make decisions for you anymore, if that makes sense. The thing about healing is, and the thing about lessons is that they never stop. You never keep moving forward. You go through the little stuff, which is uncomfortable and unpleasant, but not as uncomfortable and unpleasant as other things. You keep thinking that at some point you're going to get to that place where you know everything, or you're completely healed, or whatever. That's not a realistic thing. And you and I both know that that's not a realistic thing. But the issue is that the lessons always get harder, because we already did the easy ones. So they have to continue to be harder. I feel like a lot of this stems around your career in some ways, what you're doing. And a lot of it rules the excuses that you make, the excuses that everybody makes, all the excuses that we keep in the bag of excuses just in case we need to pull one out because we're being called out on the carpet or something like that. Our emotions always rule those excuses. So I feel like this week there's going to be a couple of opportunities where you're going to want to delve into that bag. And when you do, you want to stop yourself and go, okay, wait a minute. Why am I delving in the bag? And by asking yourself that question, it helps you to determine maybe what it is you're running away from, maybe what it is you're trying to avoid, maybe what it is that you have been doing, that you've been trying to tell yourself that you haven't been doing, if that makes any sense at all. I know it will and it won't. Let's put it that way. But I know you know what I'm talking about in terms of the process as well. It's no fun. Nobody ever said it was fun. But you got to admit, after you go through it and you see other people that refuse to do it, I don't know about you, but I'm like, thank goodness I am who I am and I made the choices that I made. And I don't have to live in that place anymore, because that would be miserable. Agreed, sometimes I do miss it. Sometimes I do miss being ignorant. But in all honesty, that's few and far between. Honestly, I am very happy that I don't live in that same space that most people do. And I am also happy that I'm past the point, and I know you're past this point too, where you feel like you have to take everybody with you. Like, it's not that is never a thing for me, but it's not much of a thing as it used to be, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of freedom in that as well. So this is what I have for you. I hope it wasn't gibberish, because it sure did feel like it was. Moving on to Mama Sherri, we have no planets in Sagittarius this week. Focus is on self, although we are moving into focus being on inner trauma as well. And that is not pleasant for anybody. You have a lot of experience with inner child work, and that's usually where the inner trauma comes up, and working through your triggers. And I know you know how to do all this because you taught me a lot of how to do all of that too. I just have to say it. I don't know why you still struggle alone when you know you can make a phone call. And I know you're gonna say, but I don't want to bother you and this and that and the other thing. And this is what we're here for each other for. We make time for each other. You always make time for me. Why should I not make time for you? Why would you think that you don't deserve for me to make time for you? Why would you think it bothers me to make time for you? I'm not saying you do this all the time. I'm saying that it continues to come up in your mind every now and then and pop up. And when you need it, you should reach out, because you know I'll do the same thing that you do. As soon as I have time, I will make that time. You will have an appointment and it will be your dedicated time. And that's all I've got to say about that. It just popped in my head, but that's part of the development, isn't? That's part of the process. And you and I both know that it gets much more challenging as we continue to go. And that in itself is really annoying and frustrating. I remember all the times I railed against it, and you just very calmly and politely told me, you don't have to like it. It is what it is. And now I feel that that's me having to say that to you. No, you don't like it, but it is what it is. Until you can change it or make it different, if you can do that at all, there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the annoying part. But what I see coming out of this for you also is the fact that whereas most people, this is going to be something that draws on and on and on forever, for you, it doesn't. Because eventually you get to a point where you're like, this isn't helping me. So I'm not going to be in this space anymore. And then you're not. But you know, when you get stuck, you can always call. Or you can always text me and we'll set up some time. Either way, however we do it, I'm always there for you, babe. You know that. So that's what I have for you, other mama. And finally, we are moving on to Alyssa. We have Saturn, which is in a trine with Mars. Saturn, 0 degrees Pisces. So it is officially right on the cusp of Pisces and Aquarius, which means next week it'll start bumping into Aquarius. We'll still be on the cusp for a week or so. So you will still feel the effects of it, but it's moving out. Slowly but surely it is, and continues to be in opposition with Venus all week long. Saturn's placement is very interesting this week because it's right on the cusp of the mind, how the mind works, and the past influences that sort of make that up, if that makes sense. And we all know the easy go-to past influences, our parents or grandparents or teachers, different, kids at school, yada, yada, yada. We can always come up with different people that influenced our mindset and somehow programmed it. But Saturn is reminding us that it's our responsibility to either keep that programming or reprogram it. So we are making an active choice always, with whatever it is that we are doing. We're making an active choice to either keep that mindset, which is not working for us, or to reprogram it into something that does work. Saturn's trine with Mars is awesome because Saturn's trine with Mars is is pointing right towards your career, a lot of energy going into your career. So this could be adding some new things that are going to generate some more income. This could be maybe getting more hours at work. A lot of energy is being put towards your career. So I feel like this is a very good thing. But you do have to be aware that it's Mars energy. Mars energy can burn you out pretty quickly. So self-care is really important in between the work time. We also continue to have that grand sextile that Neptune is in with Pluto and Uranus. Now, Neptune is focused on the mind and how the mind works. And we're reminding you that intuition, remember the class now, intuition, first thought process. If your mind is full of fiddle faddle, as they used to say, you're constantly worrying, you're over analyzing things, it's really hard for that intuition to come in. You're blocking it. So you want to be clear as much as possible. Pluto is sort of there to help you take some power from past experiences, if that makes sense. Maybe reminders of when you were successful, which help make you feel powerful because you were successful before, so you could do it again, right? And Uranus is focused on those you love and how much they are there to help and support you. And I feel like most of the time you can totally feel that. Sometimes not so much. Sometimes I know it gets a little bit overwhelming. But we tend to really focus our energy in one direction or the other, depending on the circumstances of the time. So if the circumstances are difficult, somebody's being kind of draining, then obviously our mindset is going to go right to all the times that they've been draining and not all the times that they've been helpful. Whereas on a good day, you're focusing on all the wonderful things about the person, and you're completely not even paying attention to all the not so wonderful things about different individuals. So it really does depend on your mood, and being aware of that is also really helpful as well, because the more we focus on negativity, the more it zaps our energy and the more unmotivated we become. And when we're unmotivated, we don't even try, and when we don't even try, we don't succeed, period. It's kind of a tangled web we weave. So being aware of that definitely can help you to make the good choices you need to make to move in the right direction. So that's what I have for you, my dear. And that's what I have for everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging out and for the readings again this week. I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. You all know that, obviously. Thank you so much for your continued memberships. I enjoy doing these readings for you guys every single week. It is tiring sometimes, but not to the point where I don't just absolutely adore every single one of you for being the first in my group of membership. So I thank you guys very, very much for sticking with me through all the craziness and the continued craziness that is going to come up here in the next couple of weeks, but hopefully not be as crazy as it was in the past. Okay, I'm out. I hope you guys all have a wonderful week. Make it a great week. I know you can. I'm going to make it a great week and a very productive week, because that is where I'm putting my mindset, is making it a great week. And you guys, I will see you next week. Have a good one, you guys.